All right then. So we are here with Joe Clifford on the Grappling Physio podcast. Joe, how you doing today? All right?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for asking and thanks for having me on your podcast.
No problem. So this came about, thanks for coming on, but this came about because recently, having moved into the whole Cutman world myself as a little side little project and thing, a friend of mine attended your course. A Scouse lad, Cutman Cookie, Dave Cook up in Liverpool. And he was raving about you, going, mate, you want to get in touch with this guy, have a chat with him, hook him up, link into him. Fantastic. And I thought, what a great way of doing that is to obviously come on the podcast and have a good conversation with you. So thanks for coming today. How's things in Dublin? How's the weather?
Well, blissfully enough, it's good out there. So I'm going to try get about 30 minutes in before I go back to work. I'm doing a split shift today. So yeah, it's blissful. It's beautiful.
And were you working the weekend at Cage Warriors?
No, I was supposed to work, but basically I had to pass that one on. It's called marital advice. I owed my dear beautiful wife a night out, and so we had to do it that way.
Brilliant. Excellent. So can we go kind of like back to the start with you, Joe, like where it all started? We just had a little off-air conversation there. And when you were asking me like where I from and where I was from and where I kind of like grew up, my background. And then obviously we have got something in common. So if you start from there and then how you got into kind of like being a cut man, that'd be great.
Okay. I fell into boxing. We were just discussing our sports and stuff, and I kind of fell into boxing. See, there was a couple of events happened at the same time in the 80s, really. It was pretty bad. I think it was early 80s, 80, 81, 82. Heroin hit the city of Dublin and it was really bad. There was heroin everywhere in every nook and cranny. Just absolutely creamed the population really. And my father was a little bit dubious about the whole situation because we lived just off city centre. We weren't far from the city centre. And my father knew that soccer wasn't going to keep me busy as, an adolescent. So a little bit of tough love. He said he was going to take my boots out the back garden and burn them. Now, people would probably think that's a little bit hard and hot and heavy. But he said, right, son, he said, I'll tell you what's happening with your boots. They're gone on the floor. You're going to boxing. And I go, well, I'll go boxing if you don't burn my boots. And he goes, right, okay, so you're going boxing. Put me at the door, threw me in the door of the club. And back then it was just like a plastic bag with your underpants and a towel in it. So, and a t-shirt. You didn't need to change of tracksuit bottoms. And that was it. I fell in love with it. So I owe my father so much because of that, because I know a lot of people I grew up with are dead from the same era. So he saved my tailboard. And not only that, I got employment from it then later on. So I'm in boxing, fall in love with it, and then basically I got an education. I started to get an education. I went back. And, like I'd love to tell you that it was an option to really, to do physiotherapy when we were, younger. That wasn't an option. You just did what your father did, which was literally trades. And so I got into electricity, fell into electricity. And it was electrical science that really switched me on. It was just the whole Tokyo train system, magnetism and stuff. And I understood it, and I come to understood I was a visual learner, and off the back of that, then I started to pursue other things. I thought, right, okay, if I can, if I'm really interested in this, what else is available to me? And you've got to understand in the 80s in Dublin as well, coming into the early 90s, like there was a lot of classism here. I mean, of course, because of colonization, a little bit of a kickback because I'm not blaming Great Britain for who we are today. I'm saying, like, there's certain cultural habits that are formed through generations, and we basically carry those forward. And I always remember ringing up the University of Limerick and asking them for an application form, and they go, it's very hard to get into the college. That reply to me alone was the bit between my teeth. I'm not giving up now. No way. I'm having this. So I just pursued it, and then eventually, yeah, I got my education. So that took me out of boxing for 4 years because I was heavily involved in it. And when I came back into boxing, I remember the first ever professional boxing bout that I was on. After spending time in hospitals and institutions and all of that stuff, cross-contamination, cross-infection. You know, you tune in to sit at the side of a boxing ring and then to watch a guy get a laceration over the left thigh, walk back into the corner, watch the cornerman clean the floor, right? Clean the floor with a towel. Use that same towel then to clean the fighter's face, to clean the blood spatter off his face, right? No gloves, and takes a blob of Vaseline off the ring post and then puts it into his eye. And I'm sat there watching that, and I swing around to two people left and right to me. I said, did you just see what he just did? I said, is that the most minginest thing you could ever do in a corner? And nobody's getting it. Like I'm sat there like Billy No Mates. Nobody's getting it. And I'm thinking, right, okay. So it was a combination of that and then walking into a dressing room, into the dressing room later, because I would have had a free pass. I would have known people in the National Stadium. I grew up around there. I would have known the characters. And I went down into the dressing room and there was a journeyman sitting there with the bridge of his nose just cracked across his nasal cavity. As a matter of fact, part of it was visible when you pulled out the top part of the tissue from his nose. And you could see right in there. And he was just sat there bleeding, sitting on a chair, because journeymen, they turn up to lose, and therefore, you know, they don't have any coaches with them. The reason they don't have any coaches is to maximize their earnings. They want to make as much money as possible, so they use anybody that's there at the stadium. So he sat in the back room just bleeding across the nose. And I just thought, you know, all of this is really wrong. It's just, to me, it's not right. Like, and then when you hear the language sometimes attached to fighters, like meat, pieces of meat, you know, the conveyor belt, you know, whatever. So yeah, that was the catalyst for the cut course. I just, when I started to investigate, like, you know, ways that we could kind of make it better ringside and stuff, because I'm very passionate about the sport. A lot of other therapists, they go into rugby. Soccer over here is not so, it's not as well funded as the UK. Yeah, you know, like boxing wasn't the place to really go to kind of, you know, to work your magic kind of thing. So yeah, it was different, but I was determined. I wanted to do something to make some noise in it, to at least draw attention to the standards in corners. And then my own boxing club, Crumlin Boxing Club, asked me would I do the corner for a couple of the pros, because they just turned the gym from amateur to professional, amateur and professional. And then I started to investigate what is Cutman, what is Cutwoman, whatever, and I was shocked to know that it's kind of a book of make it up as you go along kind of stuff. And a lot of it breaks our constitution in terms of administering dangerous drugs, acquiring a drug and then administering it to a third party without any kind of dose or, you know, medical history or, you know, any of that. You're not actually insured to actually administer or licensed to administer a dangerous drug like epinephrine or stuff. So I began to see that there was a lot of discrepancies with the business, not only in terms of dangerous drugs being used in corners, but also pieces of steel, end swells, no evidence. There was a PubMed study on it done not so long ago, and they compared it to ice bags, and end swell came in last for every, between leaving residual temperature on the tissue and then also its temperature on contact and stuff like that, in comparison to just a resealable ice bag that molds into the contours of your face. And then I've worked alongside cut people who would bring kilos and kilos of steel end swells with them because they had curves in this way and that way, and they tried to fit the curves into different people. So a big bruise, big curve, big lump of steel that weighs probably half a kilo or something in your hand. And I'm looking at all of this and I'm going, do you really need all that stuff? Like, you know, where's the information coming from that? Would you believe end swells are really a byproduct of a history of about 270 years? Way back in the day, they do things like they would take a piece of chewing tobacco out of their mouth, put that into the open wound, and then they take a cutmen that were stateside because of British colonization. You brought fist fighting to the colonies, which was regarded as a vagabond sport. And then later, the Marquess of Queensberry rule separated the two, and then boxing took off and stuff. But yeah, it's a fascinating history, 270-year-old history. Like we've been around a long time. Like cut people have been tending injuries for quite some time. Like, but it just seems somewhere along the line that nobody's really put an any kind of official training on it or anything like that. Nobody's really researched it. It seems since 1980 when they introduced epinephrine, they've just stopped evolving. It just seems like I'm not saying I was part of the same family, the same community. I am part of that same community. Like it's yeah, it kind of upsets me a little bit that we accept substandard in corners because I was one of those kids sitting in those corners, you know, and I would like to think that the people that are sat there have some kind of an education that can help me because part of the course is traumatic brain injury, lacerations, hematomas, all the rest of it and stuff. But it's not only that, it's about critical decision making because I've witnessed two people die in the ring. It's about like just noticing small things, traumatic brain injury. I've recorded video of traumatic brain injury. As a matter of fact, it's on YouTube. It's called Death in the Ring. Dennis Munson. Um, you know, you can watch a traumatic brain injury happening for real if it benefits coaches and they can understand that this is the characteristics of it. So for me, it's like the whole cut stuff is something I'm falling into, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about because, um, yeah, because of witnessing two people die in the ring. So yeah, I got the bit between my teeth with it. I won't let it go. I've been pushed back many times from different people or different organizations and stuff like that, but I won't let it go, no, because I believe there should be a standard there for everybody.
Well, that's
So
very interesting that you should say that, Joe. The problem is when you're within that circle, it is very hard to push back. And
mhm.
sometimes, you know, when you put your head above the parapet, you get noticed, and that could be perceived by all the wrong reasons. What are the kind of barriers or frustrations you've had in demanding a more of a kind of excellence or a higher standard of professionalism from the cut man, a hand wrapper within the corner?
Okay, resistance. Well, I've contacted the British Board of Boxing Control more than once, and I have a one-line reply from the British Board of Boxing Control, as in that they have their own training, but I know that on what type of training they get. It's pretty much basic first aid, but nobody gives them permission to use epinephrine. Nobody's standing over them when they administer it, and apparently that's the only legal way you can really do it if the prescriber is standing within proximity of the actual person that's administering the drug. Um, the resistance I've got has been through other cut people who basically sometimes joined in teams and communities to bombard me with just negativity or just BS and calling me all sorts of this, that, and the other. Look, see that's a turtleneck I have back there. I'm good. Keep spilling onto it. I'm good with that. I'll keep pushing forward because I know what it's really about. They just feel a little bit threatened, you know? Like anything that I try to do is not to try eliminate the past, it's just to try evolve it. It's just to try take that profession and bring it forward. I suppose the vast majority of resistance that I've received is just being blanked, just being pushed out all the time, or else people want what you have, but they don't want to go through the process of getting that kind of expertise. They don't want to go through the process. They want to be an expert overnight and teach it within a couple of month period. I think that's okay if the message is safety, but if you don't actually know the like you can read all you want, you can do a weekend course, you'll take in a certain amount of information without the practice and the exposure and the hours and the volume and stuff like that. It's just seeing how it all ticks, how we're all interdependent on each other ringside. You know, the referees and judges, the event medical teams, we should be all interconnected and we try to set up these systems up here. It was all of that stuff trying to connect with people and say, right, okay, why don't we hook up with the ringside, yeah, doctors and stuff like that. It just got a little bit too big for people and they pushed back. And so, like I said, I've been in contact with the British Board of Boxing Control, and I've got a one line response from them in a letter. Outside of that, I eventually, I think it was through just sheer pig iron. I wouldn't give up. I just kept on going at it. ABA, Athletic International Boxing Association, IBA, who they later became International Boxing Association, probably trying to kick off the shady past of who they are as a very corrupt organization and stuff like that. I have worked for them, and same with IMAF and various other international mixed martial arts federation. And I did present for the UFC once in Australia. But I do find when you work with people, what they try to do is take what they want out of it. They sometimes want to bastardize it, and that upsets me because you just can't take that element of it because it doesn't really upset your kind of, the way you think it should be.
Can you
Like,
give me an example, Joe? What do you mean?
well, like, oh, we had to work really hard. I'll give you an example. If you go to Great Britain, right, it says on the equipment list that you can use epinephrine. It says that it's on the equipment list. It doesn't tell you who can use it, right? It doesn't tell you who can use it. So in black and white, it doesn't tell you who can use it. So there's a ton of gray there, right? But people use it. The only way that you can use it is in proximity to a doctor, the prescriber of the drug who gave it to you, who is now standing supervising you, administering it to a third party. That's the only way you can do it. So I said, wouldn't it be easier if you just put some hemostatic agents, which you can acquire across counter, which are basic first aid, which would come under that premise? Wouldn't it be easier to introduce that into your equipment list, and therefore, you don't have to worry about the legality of that over there? And then, of course, then that was shut down and just blanked out, kind of thing, and but the more I have worked within organizations, I equally know that those who call themselves experts, yeah, nobody's the finished product. Nobody's the finished product, but you have to have peers around you all the time to help kind of direct you in the right direction and stuff. You'd find in the cut profession that that's non-existent. Doesn't happen. It's every man for themselves kind of thing. And it's opinions. There's nothing in, like, what I try to do is make it evidence-based, put structure to it. This happens because of that. Like, if you're going to work cuts, they're not even cuts. We deal with lacerations. Cuts are caused by sharp instruments. Like, we deal with blunt force and trauma. They're the lacerations. But laceration man or laceration woman doesn't sound as good as cut man or cut woman, right? So who wants to be called laceration man? But anyway, that's part and parcel. There's no education behind it. I think if you are going to deal with a laceration, you should know the difference between venal bleeds, arterial bleeds, what products I can use. Can I get across the counter products that are good with those? Well, absolutely you can. How about nosebleeds? You produce a great product in the UK called Reliostat. It was all that stuff, and I kept on proposing and bringing it to organizations. Okay, if I don't want to use that, is there other stuff that I can use? And I just found if I made inroads here, I was pushed back there. And then if a new president came in, that meant that it was like I was starting all over again. I just thought, you know what? I can't do this anymore. It's just when I say I can't do it, I thought I felt I would be better independently of all of that.
So and that is essentially where the course, your own course that you run, spawned its kind of
Yeah.
origin. And yeah, okay,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, let's stay on that. Do you kind of it's interesting. I did amateur boxer when I was younger, and then I kind of fell off it a little bit when I got a little bit too old for it, and then got into the grappling, BJJ, etc., which was a lot more easier, which meant I didn't have to,
I don't know.
take any punching in the face, So, and it was actually a patient of mine that got me into it. He came in, he was a grappler, and he had multiple injuries, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I do this thing called jiu-jitsu," and I had this image of a bunch of Aikido guys, and he went, "No, no,
Ah,
no, I'll show you." And then after a clinic one evening, he choked me out.
as you do.
As you do, yeah, yeah. So that my patient choked me out, but he's a good friend. But that was kind of like my journey. But when I kind of get back, and I'm slowly getting back into the boxing. I work with a pro fighter at the moment who's a former member of the Team GB. He's turned pro. The idea was to make his corner and his team as professional as possible.
Mm.
Because a lot of like prospects or high amateurs, when they do turn pro, especially if they're on Team GB, Team Ireland, whatever, if they represent their country, they have an amazing support network around them.
Yeah,
Coaches,
yeah,
physios, strength and
yeah,
conditioning coaches, nutritionists, psychologists,
yeah,
people who
yeah,
can, all of this team, the team behind the team, I think they call it, to
yeah,
get the person to the dance, which will either be Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, European, World Championships, whatever. And then when people go pro, that's not there. There's suddenly a massive
yeah, yeah.
deficit. And you find that their one pro coach is doing all these different jobs. So the idea was this young lad's dad, who I've known for years, and we go back because we were amateur boxers together at the same club. He said, "Look, I need to build a solid team around my son and him going forward." And that was how I progressed. Was initially acting as his physio. It was like, well, I'm looking after your hands and all the rest of your body anyway. Why don't I just go into this game properly and
Little
start
monkey.
wrapping your hands and start looking after cuts? And this is where kind of the more I get exposed to it, the more questions I have, because me as a physio, I'm governed by professional codes of conduct.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists, which says in my role, I have to perform and do these tasks, and I have to have additional insurance. For
Hmm.
me to prescribe exercises, it has to be exercise, or sorry, the exercises predominantly have to be evidence-based. So,
Hmm.
I have to say, well, if you do these exercises for your back, there's good studies that say these will help you and help you resolve your symptoms. And that's through years and years of training. That is continual professional development happens on a year out basis. I have to hit or reach certain points in my CPD, my continual professional development. And the more I spend time and like wrapping hands and the cutman, I haven't done the cut work yet because I haven't finished my license. I haven't been awarded my license yet because I haven't finished the course. I've just been put forward for it. Um, it beggars more questions, and I think, well, what about in this scenario? Like, like the prescription of adrenaline, for example. It's
Mm.
like for me to prescribe something, I have to go on an additional extended, I think it's a year's course for
Mm.
me as a clinician to prescribe paracetamol or ibuprofen that you can buy over the counter.
Yeah.
And it's concerning, but I just like what you said. The only way we can get better is to question the current narrative and say, well, is what we're doing correct and is it right? Just because it's been done like this for years, does it
Hmm.
mean it's correct? So question everything. And I think that goes
Right.
back to like what you said when you were kind of approaching these different boards. It's like, look, now what about this? Or I've got a suggestion for this, where you kind of face a bit of resistance. And I completely understand the fact that there's only so many times you can do that where you keep getting knocked back. Rejection can take its toll on you. And I definitely understand setting up your own independent course, because then you can say, well, I'll put my own stamp on it. I'll put my own fingerprint on this, and I'll
Yeah.
deliver what I think is, appropriate. But by doing so, you set the bar very high. And having looked into your stuff and spoke to my friend and, done my own training, it seems like it's at a really, really good professional level. How do you like maintain that professional level yourself?
Right. Um, there's a lot in what you said. I mean, you need constant contact out there with what's going on, really. If I can't just sit here and just, kind of perceive how it should be unless I have my finger on the pulse constantly. A lot of the stuff that I did was just taking notes through contact and just looking. I'll give you an example of it. I literally I wrote for ABA and IMAF protocol for cut people and a rule book that was never there before. That there was never ever a rule book for cut people, and I wrote one both for both of them. And I will give you an example of one. It was just basically what it just frameworks in terms of not only the history of it, but basically critical decision making at critical times, communication, collaborative decision making, how to make good decisions in corners. All of that's done prior to all of the rest of it happening, and then into hand wrapping and so on and so forth and stuff like that. What I was trying to do with the all of the stuff that I put together was just purely because of contacts being in those areas. and then sending emails constantly to people, just like you starting off a professional boxer, then being exposed to different teams. I've been in corners where like the team literally had a fight in the corner, where I was just sat there, and then the coach said something to the Chiefs or the seconds assist. He threw water at him. The coach threw a towel, and the two of them are having a punch up over me back, and I'm sat there kind of yeah, that's the obvious stuff you don't do, right? But equally, I've been in corners where there's too much emotion and stuff like that. So it was really just to get coaches to self-analyze, to use a high performance model kind of in the background and constantly self-evaluate. Hand wrapping, you've a great guy over there, Ian Gatt. I think he's Maltese. He works with Team
Yeah,
GB. You know,
that's
Ian?
right. Yeah, no, I did Ian Gatt's hand injury and management course up at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield about, oh God, maybe
He's done his PhD in it, didn't he?
7 years ago. But I
Yeah.
mean, fantastic. I mean, he is now working with a lot of pro boxers himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've got great respect for Ian. I think he's fantastic and he's a pioneer because, Ian has took the same approach that he has, the high kind of value, very professional approach to physiotherapy and applied it to the corner.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
he's a great guy, and he's leading the standard, I think, or setting the bar very high, like yourself, Joe.
Well, the thing about Ian, and I really liked about Ian, was I remember he there's a method called three-phase stacking, which is putting tape on directly on the skin. Tape directly on the skin, then bandaged and tape. Now it's pro in terms of proprioception, it's gold. And small joints, it inhibits small joint movement or limits, not completely inhibits, but limits. But it's a gem. It works. It really really does work. And I remember the first time that I'd kind of come across Ian was at the World Championships in Hamburg in 2018. It was probably before that, but I bumped into him. And he'd used three-phase stacking, which is illegal. You're not allowed to do it. And I was saying to him, you can't do it. It's just a thing. So Ian being Ian, come back to me and said, "But what do you think as a therapist? Do you think it's right or wrong?" And I thought about it, and I think you're completely right. I think you're completely right, and I think we should push towards to being allowing coaches to use it as a primo type of hand wrapping, because it'll provide far more stability than what's out there, like a framework to hand wrapping. And so try to introduce it then.
Joe, can we so just let's be clear on that. So free phase stacking is first of all tape on the kind of on the hand
On the carpals and
around the
metacarpals.
carpals and the metacarpals first as a first layer, followed by
Yeah,
gauze,
yeah.
followed by
Followed by
additional strap locking in
yeah,
tape as well.
yeah.
Yep.
Locking in tape. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Just to
three
be
phase
just to be
stacking.
clear on that. Yep.
So a beautiful method for hand wrapping, and does a great job. But long and short of it, anyway, we tried to implement it, or when I was involved with them, tried to get it implemented or tried to get it introduced into rule set. The problem that you have then, which really, yeah, the problem that you have is that people cheat and they use it as an opportunity to do their own style of hand wrapping where they're putting kind of a layer of, they're stacking zinc oxide tape across the knuckles, whether roping it, layering it, whatever. And unfortunately, because of that reason, then you can't allow others to do it. It's because it's consistent. People will breach the rule all the time. If you're allowing tape on the skin, it's supposed to stop 2.5 centimeters from the knuckles. So around about one finger width back, somewhere down here's your line. Okay, it's supposed to stop there, but you just can't trust people, and that's my experience at international competition. We try to give people, um, you know, we try to give people enough rope, but they end up just hanging themselves with it all the time. Anytime we introduce an international competition, so that was Ian's idea.
Well, I mean, I like that. The question, well, what's the difference? What does it do? Let's ask the question. Let's get behind the
Yeah,
science behind that. What I found really interesting when I went on my course, and it was one of those jaw-dropping moments where they turned around and they said, "There's no requirement to actually wrap the hands. You're not required in the British Boxing Board of Control
yeah,
to
yeah,
wrap a pro fighter's hands. They could just put the hand straight in the glove." And I just went, you know,
yeah,
having boxed and wrapped my hands as an amateur and thought, No, surely not. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, see,
So,
like you, sorry.
so from your perspective, why do we wrap hands?
Well, Mike Loosemore, again, you'd probably know Mike Loosemore, doctor. He worked with Team GB.
I've not come across them
Um,
though.
okay, Mike. Mike works with IBA, and he found the study wasn't um, over a 5 year study. I think it was a 5 year study where they studied hand wraps, professional hand wraps in AOB competition, athletic open box competition. It's never been peer reviewed, but we it wouldn't be uncommon for that to happen in ABA, where we do internal research on whatever topic, or we pick an item and we go for whether it's concussion or something like. And so he found over a 5 year study that it actually reduced hand injuries by 500%. So I know it's not peer reviewed. I know that's not out there in the public, but Mike Loosemore's done some great research on not only contact points. He tried to design a kind of a pressure pad that would pick up the vast majority of contact every time you punched and stuff like that. He's been at the forefront of a lot of research internally within ABA as well. So he's a great guy, Iba. So there's individuals out there trying to cut something out there to do something good.
I mean, I'd sooner have somebody's or a fighter's hands wrapped, even if they did sustain, a traumatic fracture or a displacement, because at least when you take the glove off, until you get them to the X-ray department, that finger's compressed. And what's one of the
Yeah.
first things that we teach, in our first aid values? Well, put some compression on there, get some ice on it. That wrap's not coming off until we get to A&E, and then we can X-ray it, because that'll stem swelling.
Mm-hmm.
So at least the wrap is going to, again, prevent any kind of extension or flexion injuries if they miscalculate a punch or the punch slips off, damaging the wrist, but it's going to keep everything together.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Makes sense. But the research that we found in comparison to using the 4.3 meter Velcro wraps, I mean, true, again, that wasn't peer reviewed, but again, Mike Loosemore, we know that from I was working with ABA at that time, IBA. So you have people like both like Ian and Mike that are doing research. The problem is like you're going up against dinosaurs because since 1980 they've been using a substance called in up to 1980 they've been using a substance called Moncel solution, right? Since 1980 they've been using epinephrine and it seems to be the go-to kid. And it's like nobody's willing to have a look out there at anything else. They have in some states in the states allowed the use of other hemostatic agents, including quick lock, quick aid, reliostat, other natural products that are not prescribed. But then if you look in amateur boxing, the equipment lists permit you to use everything from epinephrine, thrombin, elastin, dehydrators, multipliers. What else? You have Surgicel, Jello foam, microfibrillar collagen. It just the list goes on and on. Rule 1623. In reality, there's only one drug they'll permit you to use, which is epinephrine, but that depends on country to country. I know in the UK, they still won't allow amateur boxers to have cut people in corners. Well, they have cut people in corners in Ireland and other parts of Europe. They'll use them during competition, national championships, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's the whole thing is it hasn't really evolved, and it was quite easy for me then to pick up the pieces and have a look. Okay, if you're going to take an end swell out, then what am I going to use instead of it? A resealable bag. Okay, resealable bag. Right, I need to tell people what's the benefits of using a resealable bag. Well, it's cheaper than an end swell. That's one thing. The second thing is molds into the contours of the face. Third thing is residual temperature once you've removed it from the injury itself. And then the initial contact and temperature is greater than using the end swell. So I thought, you list it all down and that should give people a good indication of the reasons why you should or shouldn't use it. Those same people would ring you up a couple of weeks later or months later and ask you, where can I buy an end swell? And you're kind of going like, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom.
Well, like what you said, like what are end swells made up of? They're made up of metal, aren't they?
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is a horrendous conductor, isn't it? So
yeah.
if you're holding it in ice, you take it up, good chances are by the time you've even got it to the face, it's lost that initial cold. Whereas if you've got crushed ice, like what you said, which can be formed around the joint, can be used effectively, causes immediate vasoconstriction and a reduction of blood flow to that particular area, then fantastic.
Yeah. Solid ice. Solid ice. Get your solid ice on there with your drop of water. Because I've no life, I actually done a study on that too. So what I did was I left different types of ice: solid ice, crushed ice, ice with seawater. Made comparisons in temperature and then how long they would actually last before they melted and stuff. I done that over 3 or 4 hours at room temperature here in my living room. I've no life. It was the kind of stuff I was interested in, and I just thought, well, if I'm going to prove anything, I'm going to film it as well. I was obsessed with getting my point across because if I thought, well, if they don't believe what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and I've just produced a study for some ridiculous reason, I thought I'll produce a video and they can see it. At least if they can see it, and then people still do the same thing anyway. So yeah. So
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
done that typically with loads of stuff, including treating lacerations.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
That, I mean, you're right what you said again about no, it's not a cut, it's a laceration. And I mean, I'm considering just writing to one of my local hospitals because I haven't worked in a hospital for quite a few years now, and just can I just come down and sit in A&E and volunteer and watch you guys treat cuts, etc. Just observe, get as much, a couple of hours over the weekend when it's really busy. You know what I mean?
but I
Just
got
for
one
my
for you.
own development. Sorry, Joe.
Paul, I got one for you. I got
Yeah.
one for you. Ice hockey.
Well, yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
That's where I started. That was one of the. I've actually omitted that from the story actually, but when I actually graduated, we've a thing over here called chance in your arm, right? So I think I was 2 years into my course, and at the time, because of the Good Friday Agreement, and we formed a nice.
One, go for it, mate. So apologies about that.
Okay. So ice hockey, yeah. So because of the Good Friday Agreement, what had happened was basically they formed an Irish ice hockey team with both from Northern Ireland and Ireland. So you had nine Belfast Protestants on it, and then the rest were Catholic. And then we brought in the Godfather rule, and we had Irish American, Irish Canadian, and then one Irish Swede. We found an Irish Swede. Don't ask me how. Found an Irish Swede and brought him over. So we put this team together, and what a team! Like we had a lot of fun. But what it did was, if the vast majority of injuries from rookies, I suppose, when they get in and out from the bin, as they get in, they swing their skate around, and sometimes the skate catches, their teammates as their boot comes around. So
Lovely.
rookies do it sometimes. They, whatever. Anyway, so that's how they end up with sutures in some cases, in rookie cases, another case being smashed against the glasses. But what happened is they would have to be turned over really fast. And so I was working with an Asian Canadian doctor called Dr. Peter Thing, and I was working with him, and it was like bump, 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 bump. We'd hit them, turn them over, and put them back on the ice really fast. And he was the one that really taught me about anything. He was the catalyst for me coming to understand how to effectively and efficiently stop bleeds and stuff like that. So he was amazing.
What does it take to be a good cutman, Joe, in your opinion?
Uh, if I'm being totally honest with you, you know, you really need to be ambidextrous. You need to be able to work from both sides. I'm vertically challenged. I'm only 5'7", and I've worked with athletes like Stefan Struve, who's 2 meters tall. So I have to sit the guy down. I have to find a way that I can work with the guy. Otherwise, I'm chest level at best with him. Um, Practice, like how you practice, is essential. Uh, like there's no excuses. Like when you look at different sports, if I was to give you an example, say if you took amateur boxing in comparison to professional boxing. In amateur boxing, you can only work from the outside of the left ropes, on the left side of the ropes. in amateur open box competition or athletic open box competition, you can work only from the left side of the ring or in the ring. Now that may seem like a piece of cake to you, but what happens when the fighter, the boxer, gets a laceration on the opposite side of the face, and you have to treat that, and you're outside of the ring because the coach is old school and won't let you inside of the ring. Okay, maybe you're tall enough you can reach across, but what happens if you're not? So it's all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, if you haven't prepared for that, if you haven't got the exposure to that, right, well, then you shouldn't be learning at ringside. I don't know who or what gives you permission to go ahead and treat, you know, to take part in an activity if you're not actually, you know, I understand sometimes if people are stuck, if it's all that they have, you know, like, and you're honest about it, but then there are too many people that assume this, you know, kind of prima donna kind of reputation of I'm the man or I'm the woman here, I'm doing the business, you know, back off everybody. I know them a lot of the time they're clueless, just absolutely clueless what they're doing and how they're using substances and stuff. Now, if you made that comparison to amateur boxing, now have a look at professional boxing. In professional boxing, I can walk through the ropes from the left side, the right side. I can walk in the ring. I can walk over the ropes, through the ropes, or in the ring. There are 4 in a corner in comparison to amateur boxing, which there are 3. What happens if there are 2 coaches allowed in the ring, like in Muay Thai? There's 2 coaches allowed in the ring. So the dynamics of working a corner changes depending on the combat sport. Like rookies don't know that. And rookies don't know that because they don't have the experience of doing it. And unless you're exposed to that sport and you've done your research to whatever sport you're going to be involved in, well, then of course you're going to be caught with your pants down. Of course you're going to get caught. Of course you're going to learn on the job, but it's not the place to do it, particularly when it's high stakes, when people are asking you in to do a job specifically where experience is required. And unfortunately, the cut profession is just loaded with people who just make it up as they go along.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Right.
What are some kind of what are some super essential don'ts as a cut man?
Right. The biggest one, verbalizing what you're seeing. Like, how many times have I seen people approach an injury and go, "Oh my God." Like it's like big alloy day, like it's like that, like, and you're kind of going, "No, don't do that."
And the boxer's looking at you like, "Wow, what is it?"
Hands on. Should I be boxing? Yeah. So, and if you want proof of that, right? If you like, go watch the Tyson Fury fight against Ottawa Wallin. Go watch that fight, okay? Now, the cut person in the corner that night was Jorge Capetillo. Jorge Capetillo got accolades for stopping that bleed on Tyson Fury that night. There was a couple of things that happened that night that should have been, you know, the cut person got accolades for, but what he did was he legally used excessive amounts of grease to stem the flow of blood. Because let's face it, whatever product he was using again and again and again, he was using the same product over and over and over again. I mean, drenched in blood, the same piece of gauze, the same towel, again, without any gloves on and stuff. But he verbalizes what he sees on contact. Oh, you've got 2 cuts on your face. You know what I mean? He verbalizes that was one thing. But then he puts grease in Tyson Fury's eye 2 or 3 times. Like, what he did was clever. He abused the rules and he got away with it. And the reason you get away with it is collectively on that night, a member of BT Sports walked into Tyson Fury's corner and told him that they weren't going to stop the fight after the 4th round. The actual laceration itself was over the right side of Tyson Fury's eye. It was horrific. It was a flap. It was perpendicular. There was two lacerations perpendicular. In the technical rule book, it says that's a fight stoppage. It says it's a fight stoppage. Even the size of the wound, it was a flap. It was a fight stoppage all by itself. And then you have an individual walk from BT Sports into the corner and tell Ben Davis, Tyson Fury's coach, you're not stopping the fight. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because if you let that sink into your head for a second, an outside entity telling a corner or moving the moral and ethical goalpost to one side because they'd paid a couple of $1 million for the rematch with say it for me. Oh, I can see him. I can't. Deontay Wilder. They paid. You left me hanging there, Paul.
Sorry, I was.
Anytime you come in, don't leave me hanging. If I'm just come in there, Paul, and just throw me a life boy. You know.
Do you know what it was?
I was stumbling there for a bit.
Because I was going, and I had one of those complete dime bar moments where I went, because I was so engrossed in what you said, I was going, oh yeah, because that was the fight, and then
Yeah. Go back and watch it anyway and call me a
yeah,
liar then. And you can
yeah,
see it.
yeah.
And that's the reason they allow them to use that much grease, because that fight, the rematch with Deontay Wilder, was worth so much more money that they were prepared to put Tyson Fury's eye. That the risk for them, the risk was equal the reward. And as simple as that. He'll get looked at. We'll get him a good cosmetic surgeon and stuff. When the price of a fight is worth money, when it's worth money, the higher value of that fight, the higher the risk. It's as simple as that. The higher the risk. That's when you see unnecessary risks being taken, or officials, because of pay-per-view. We shouldn't, but you're aware because of pay-per-view. And if I'm being totally honest, have I done it myself? I don't mean in terms of right. I'll throw two scenarios at you there. Right, two scenarios. One of them is a guy comes up to me. I'm walking in the back of house. This is the Olympics. It's the quarterfinals. This guy is 32 years of age. This is the last time he'll qualify for the Olympics because he says he's finished after this championships. And as I held his hand to wrap his hands for his coach because his coach couldn't do it, I noticed that his arm was fractured. Right, he had a radial fracture. He had pins in his right radial, the last third. So I immediately he does a jump response when I hold his wrist, and I know it's pain, and I say to him, "What's happening?" And I want you to be honest. And he told me, "Okay, so there's the black and white. He can't box. He's not allowed to box. He shouldn't really go on to the next round. He's 32 years of age. He's sitting in front of me. He has a chance to qualify and get a medal. He has a chance." Right, his hand is broken, yeah, but he can still box. He's boxed through the whole tournament with a broken hand. Do I stop him or do I let him go? The book says I stop him. Tune in next week and I'll give you the answer.
Did it.
Yeah, I did. I let him box. I let him go on. He got stopped in the second round, but you know what? It's probably because I'm an old man myself. There's a bit of compassion that goes there, but equally, I've been in corners where I've known that the guy that's sitting in the corner, I've gotten to know a lot of fighters internationally. You get to meet them in the back of house wrapping their hands. You'll probably get a small window of time if you're in their training camps with them. You get to know people. And you get to know what they're capable of or not, and their characteristics in corners and stuff. It's amazing, regardless of how many people you walk with. There's certain people you walk with, and you know how they click in a corner, and you pick up their characteristics. But it's an instinct you gather, but you don't leave your own moral and ethical values. You don't ever compromise them. If a fight should be stopped, it should be stopped. It should be stopped. Yeah, I let the guy go with a broken hand. I did go. It was Olympic boxing. It was a 3-round fight. Shouldn't have done it, but he could have medaled. He could have medaled. And I understood his plight. I understood it.
I get that, Joe, but there's also the that's a very difficult one, isn't it? Because if that was judo, okay, or if that was the ADCC, well, here's an example for you. There's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitor, and his name's Legato. All right,
Yeah.
And he competed in the Pan Ams 10 days after chemotherapy. 10 days he competed, and he had a fractured or was it a dislocated humerus, or he had a fracture somewhere in the upper limb, and he said strap it up. It was strapped up within his gi, okay, and he went on and competed. So there is the element of, yes, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can say, look, I disagree with this. I don't think you should do this. However,
Yeah,
that's my advice. You go and do it. Okay. Like,
yeah,
I think if seriously damaged your hand after the fight, I think you should go get an x-ray. No, I'll be okay.
yeah,
You know why? Because you don't want to sit in A&E for 4 hours. It's like,
yeah,
come on.
yeah,
You know what I mean? There needs to be an element of ownership to that as well. These are still
yeah,
grown
yeah.
people that we're dealing with. Um,
I
what was
agree.
quite,
I agree.
yeah. What I was quite surprised with as well, some of the other don'ts. I know you said don't verbalize. When I was on the course, and I don't know whether you've ever come across this, but cutmen sticking adrenalized swabs up nose to stem nosebleeds.
Yeah.
Just
I,
unreal. The fact that it can cause fatalities, it can cause blindness, it can cause amazing,
I
uh,
don't do it. I
well,
don't
an
do it.
amazing amount of problems.
Yeah, yeah. I don't do. I don't use them. I don't use swabs up nose. I use Reliostat nasal wall.
Mm.
I mean, it's calcium ions. You put it up there, it expands. What the hell would I want to use two sticks for? Have them hanging out of your
Yeah,
nose. And I've watched Cutmen do it. The old, you know,
yeah.
the old Fu Manchu mustache kind of thing.
Or
I don't know. Like it's a weird one. It's like you got a population that wants to bring it into the 20, like, yeah, they want to bring it into the 24th century. You got that population. But then you've got a population that want to keep it just exactly where it's been since 1980, and it's not going forward. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, things are changing. Like in MMA, if you look at the training involved, like when we set up programs for cut people, there was 300 hours of training involved.
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
That was going to so the way kind of like boxing is sort of mark time here, but MMA just seems to be the standard of ringmanship where they supply their own judges, their own MMAs, their own cutmen. And I've looked on it. Getting qualified to do that job is phenomenal. It's like wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. And all the stuff that was written in that was all of that was trial and error. Like any stuff, like I'm just naturally inquisitive. Like the whole thing, if you think about it, hand wrapping. I wanted to know what the source was, where we came from, because one thing I've learned through college is like you need to know where you come from. There's a beginning and an end. You're going to connect the dots. Let's start in the first place. So when I put the course together, I wanted to know where we came from. Then the other element of it was like I'll give you an instance, right? I became fascinated by how coaches make critical decisions in corners, particularly those who save lives and stuff. Like I was fascinated by Joe Frazier versus Muhammad Ali in the Thriller from Manila. I was wondering why Eddie Futch made that decision. I was fascinated. Round 14 going into 15, you know, um, Joe Fraser's ahead on the cards by at least 3 rounds. Ali's losing. Ali wants to quit. Ali's verbalizing to Angelo Dundee, cut the gloves off. I'm done. I'm finished. Meanwhile, in the other corner, Joe Fraser sat down, lost the last 3 rounds, but still has done enough to win. There's 1 round left, just one. And Eddie Futch, his trainer, goes into his corner. He says, why are you eating so many right hands? And he says, I can't see. Now, what people don't know is that Joe Fraser only had one good eye. He used to memorize the alphabetic chart. So when they say second row left, straight away, he'd memorize the card and he could just cough it up. But he told his coach on that particular night, he said, look, he said, I can't see. So his coach, without hesitation, Eddie Futch said, it's done. We're finished there. 3 minutes left. Joe Fraser says, I want to go, coach. He said, no, we're finished here. We're done. Stop the fight. Courageous beyond belief, because you won't see that happen today. You don't see those kind of decisions being with that kind of weight behind it. There was something very morally solid and ethically sound about the maybe it was because we were more God orientated back then or something like that, moral and ethical issues. It was a little bit stronger family values. I don't know. But I was fascinated. Why would he make that decision at such a critical time? Because surely Ali doesn't want to box, but they didn't know that. But you could tell by his body language that he was hanging on. But then so was Joe Fraser. Joe Fraser was taking a beating in the last 3 rounds. So he stopped it on the grounds of compassion for Joe and not wanting him to get more, get harmed more. So then I go and find a New York article that was, I went through every piece of paper I could just to find out why he made a decision. And then I found a New York article from 6 weeks previous to it, the New York Times. And what had happened was Eddie Futch was watching a bout in Madison Square Gardens, and he's seen an Irish American kid die. But before he died, the guy kept on complaining, kept on blinking in the corner all the time and said he couldn't see through, he hadn't got good visibility through his eyes. And Eddie Futch had witnessed that 6 weeks previous, which falls into a category of a thing called pattern recognition, how we make decisions. We experience we have an experience in the past, present, or whatever, and they're similar in nature. We'll base our decision today on what we've witnessed previously because we've had that experience, and there's certain biases wrapped up in that. Like there's a load of biases wrapped up in that decision. So that's how we made the decision. And that's why I felt it's so important to put in, okay, before you make any decision, like cut people can stop fights, but we're usually forced contact in a corner where we've no emotional connection to it. Because cut people are universal. We work in bare knuckle boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, MMA, amateur boxing, professional boxing. Like we're universal. So yeah, it's fascinating. For me, I wanted to put something together so that people that have a better knowledge of how to make decisions in corner, exposing them to traumatic brain injuries, showing them the characteristics of how different it is to tiredness and stuff. So
But
it was much more than just stuff. Yeah, go on, sorry.
absolutely, yeah. It was interesting what you said there about that particular fight, and it got me thinking of Gerald McLennan versus Nigel
Oh
Benn.
yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
there's I've watched multiple documentaries on that, and there's a moment where I mean it was a cataclysm of failures from his corner going forward because his coach wasn't really a coach; he was a hype man, and his coach couldn't even get past 6 rounds on the pads with him. He was gassed, he was inappropriately dressed, he was in the ring, in the training camps wearing jeans and holding the pads, and then like exhausted, and he was going, he can't even hold but that was who he
Yeah.
brought to the dance with him.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where he comes in and you can see he squeezes the sponge on his head and the water runs down, and it's subtitled. Jerry McLennan turns around and he said, I felt that was running down the inside of my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's
I'd heard that.
clearly
Yeah.
severe ischemic trauma going on with inside his head, and the
Mm.
guy just didn't have a clue to recognize it, didn't
Yeah.
have an absolute clue. And it's like you look at the fallout of that. I love what you said in boxing, and you alluded to it earlier. It's the only legal sport where you can kill someone,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
someone could get killed.
Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much. Pretty much.
How do you see this kind of improving, Joe? Not that it's your mission or your responsibility. I think you're doing a great job by setting the bar high with such a good kind of course, looking at the history, and that's how you improve things. Is looking back where we come from and looking back where we're going. You talking about that, and I said, God, he's spot on there. Physiotherapy was a bunch of nurses, okay, that got together after the First World War, dealing with all the amputees, and said, I think we can do more stuff here. I think we can,
Mm.
because you were basically written off. You were like more or less dead. The fatality level was very high. If you came back from the First World War as an amputee, you would die. You were due to die within like 12 to 18 months time.
Wow.
Okay. And it was
Wow.
these nurses that got together and said, no, we're going to work with, we developed teams of prosthetics. We're going to design this. We're going to design that. We're going to teach people how to move again. We're going to look at human movement. And from that spawn the fraternity of physiotherapy,
Right.
and from years on after that, physios worked under the tutelage of doctors, but they went, hang on a minute, we know more about this particular aspect of healing. Okay, physiotherapy meaning movement and therapy meaning healing. So we know that you heal when you move. And then they fought for independence, autonomous practitioners. So we could say, this is what you need to do. Not wait
Mm.
for a prescription from your doctor and we administer the treatment. We will tell you what you need to do. And I feel Cutman is on the crest of a wave, or nearly there, by going in that direction, that role. cornerman, cutman, hand wrapper, etc.?
It is, Paul, and it doesn't really matter who does it, as long as the people that are participating in the course and the people that are actually lecturing the course, and there's opportunities there for yourself, Paul, or for Ian and stuff, if they really wanted to do it, is to spread the message, is to try to get the message out there to make it safer. Um, I can justify being involved with professional boxing. I lived in Sweden for a period of time where they talk about traumatic brain injury consistently. So hold on a second, and I even attended Benito Alomo, I think his name was, the guy from Concussion. Remember the film with Will Smith? He was over here.
CTE, yeah.
CTA. He was over here in the Royal College of Surgeons, and I went in to see him. I was over the moon. I could go in and see this guy. I've been crazy. But something just, he mixed his own faith in with his research. And not that he lost me. I get what he did. It was phenomenal and stuff, but he kind of mixed his faith in with it. And he said something that really got my goat. Trust me, the only one sitting there, the rest of them were all sitting and just, they're like, I just, well, he said basically anybody that's involved in a combat sport, now it's not quote unquote, but it's close enough to it, really didn't care about the individual that they were involved in, it was even harsher than that, right? And I was in the back waving my hand up because it was a free mic. And I was like, give me the mic. Give me the mic. I'll justify it for you.
Yeah.
You know what? Boxing clubs have always been, and as a matter of fact, since its inception, right? It's always been an underclass sport, always, and it's always been in working class areas, even today, in comparison to MMA, which is a primarily more middle classy sport. If you don't believe me, have a look at the price structure in comparison to boxing, in comparison to MMA. You could pay up to £200 for full membership in an MMA club a month, whereas boxing is a couple of quid, still a couple of quid.
I got a theory behind that, but we'll come on to that in a second. Go on.
Yeah. But anyway, long and the short of it is, like, I've been, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm over 50.
So this guy, he was doing the presentation, and you wanted to put your hand up to say,
oh,
look,
and
it's because of economic hardship, etc.
So I'm giving it loads of this in the back, like, just, and they wouldn't come near me because they seen I was too excited. You definitely don't want to give the mic to two people who are just too excited in the back room. But anyway, I wanted to say to him, how dare you? Like, how dare you say something like that? We take children, like, I'll give you an example. We had one kid, I won't mention his name, that came to us. Both his mother and father were HIV positive. Both his mother and father were drug addicts. He came from a dysfunctional back house. Both his mother and father were heroin addicts and stuff like that. He lived in a shooting gallery. So the only normality he ever knew was coming to our gym. We repeat that story over and over in every neighborhood across Great Britain, across in Ireland and Europe and stuff like that. Story is repeated numerous times over and over and over again. So, and we give those individuals. In my day, an away trip was to get the coach to get on the boat to go to Wales, to get the other coach to bring me to London to box. That was a massive away trip. And we're bringing kids to Spain, and we bring them to Portugal, we bring them to different places, boxing and stuff. Like, we teach them respect, we teach them discipline. If you're a bully, you're not going to last too long in boxing. You learn to put your ego at bay. There's lots of egos in a boxing club, but they're all under the same roof, but they come together to help each other. Like, it's me, we. Muhammad Ali said it best, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Without the platform, without the people, I'm nothing. Without you, I'm nothing. I'm nothing to train for, nothing to stuff. So I love that kind of stuff. And how dare he forever saying that, it's brutal. The people involved in it are just into just glorifying violence and stuff like that. It's an art form. Trust me. Try go into a boxing club and hit a moving target. A bag is easy. Try do it and point score. And you've got to remember that, combat sports it's about point scoring. It's not about killing or maiming. It's about point scoring. You don't get extra points for that, except in pro boxing or pro sport, not just pro boxing.
Well, I mean, you can see it from his perspective. Like you said, he threw himself into his research and became a victim of the research. But yeah, it's a way out for some people, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And boxing was great for me when I was younger, and it was fantastic, and it gave me loads of opportunities, gave me loads of discipline, made me very confident. Continue with the martial arts. There's a place on I think there's so much to be gained for versus the risk factors. But that's the thing. It's a risk, and you sign that subconscious contract. Well, you don't really get a chance as a kid, but because you don't understand it. But I suppose there's so much more that comes out of it that's positive as opposed to negative. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But those risk factors are there. Look, those risk factors are there in football. The FA have introduced something over here now where it's actively discouraged that you header the ball under the age of, I think it's 13. Right, so they're trying to avoid headering the ball in training as much as possible. In the game, okay, but in training, don't do any header training. You're actively discouraged from headering the ball.
Right.
Rugby, look at the potential to develop. Watch. I mean, all you got to do is watch the rugby over the weekend. The amount of trauma. Some of these guys
Yeah.
can just go in. They throw their lives on the line, and they can go in for a scrum, a ruck, and the scrum collapses on them, or somebody taps them at the back of the head whilst they're at a disadvantaged position. Some of these guys, the size of them, they're
Mm.
absolute ultimate specimens. And the velocity, the speed at which they're traveling, clip them on the back of the head. Now they're disabled, or they're a quadriplegic or a
Mhm.
tetraplegic, and it's like the risk factors are there, all right. But as long as you're aware of the risk factors, you make that decision as you become, more,
Mm.
consciously aware as you grow. It's interesting though, the things with CT because those lesions, those plaques that happen on the grey matter don't get picked up in an MRI. They don't get
Oh,
picked up. They are only diagnosed post-mortemly. And
yeah.
what's one of the main things for that a boxer has to go for in his medical, an MRI.
Yeah.
So
It's faulty. It's not bulletproof.
yeah,
None of
yeah,
the systems are bulletproof. Not at
yeah.
all. Not at all. I've worked on some shady ones over the years, to be honest with you. And the best advice I can give to somebody who wants to do this is you got to practice it. It has to be well practiced, well rounded, but you need to have the information. Right, there are arterial bleeds, there are venal bleeds. Do you have time to assess that? Are you going to go on color and character every time you go in there? Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah.
Which sport are you in? Is it bare knuckle boxing? Well, the dynamics of working that corner is very different than working in an amateur boxing corner. Okay, what are you going to see? Well, you're going to see multiple injuries in one, and the other one you'll be lucky to see probably in a single laceration. So,
Mm.
like it's to me, it seems incredible that people would actually put a t-shirt on and call themselves a professional and go 10 wounds in a corner without even basic first aid, or even if they had basic first aid, they don't understand what they're dealing with in the corner. Like, and then egos become involved, and when egos become involved, what you are, what the males and females are on those chairs is now just an opportunity for you to put your ego on the platform that you feel it deserves. And the people sitting on the stool become second best. Like, we are not more important. See, the whole cup profession feel they're more important than the people they represent. It's
Not at all.
rubbish.
Yeah,
You're just part of the corner. That's all you are. Get off your horse. Just be part of the corner like you were in the first place. You're just a second, a coach. That's what the rules were written for us initially for. But
absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Joe, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I
you did.
feel we are only scratching the surface. Would you come on again in the future?
Of course.
Fantastic.
Um, I'll tell you what, I'm just after finishing writing a book. It's called The Perfect Freedom. It's with an African girl that I worked with on the Commonwealth Games in 2018. And if you ever want to get a chance and talk to somebody who has absolutely incredible story, I know it's outside of physio stuff, but
Doesn't matter. Doesn't
yeah,
matter.
she's off the charts. What a life. To
Brilliant.
even think that she's made it this far. What a life to live and to make it as an official. It's not just one Olympics, but two. She's an amazing character.
Last few minutes, Joe, is to plug everything that you've done and your products. So, where can people find out about yourself? Where can they get on your
Okay.
course? How can they get on your course? Let's go.
Right. Okay. So my course, I have two separate businesses. One is Minute Medicine Man. So it'd be minutemedicineman.com. If you want to contact me, it's minutemedicineman@gmail.com. The courses are 10 modules long. You can do them privately. Either people fly over and do them with me, or I do them online, or I also do groups. I work with international bodies. I still work with international bodies. So if anybody wants to contact me again, you have two sources there, both through my website. My email is probably the best, minutemedicineman@gmail.com. That's probably the best. And the rest, all the courses and stuff, well, have a read through the content or the brochures, or if you need anything, just ask. And thanks for having me, Paul. Thanks for the interest in it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, mate. Like I said, every now and again you come across a pioneer, all right? Somebody that turns into the wind, or somebody that goes against the grain, okay, and says, what are we doing here? Or takes a look at the whole current kind of map, rips it up and says, let's start again. Let's look at this properly. And I
Mhm.
admire that. And there are aspects of your practice that I'd like to put into my own. And I think if you surround yourself with people and pioneers like yourself, eventually a bit of their genius rubs off on you. So thank you very much for your time, sir. Very much appreciated. And yeah, thanks for coming on, and we'll get you on again soon in the future.
Thanks, Paul. You're a gent. Cheers.